Hello, my name is Tara Lamut Amerlan, and I'm a program manager here at the Fair Mining Collaborative. And today I'm going to go through a quick introduction to what our organization is and what it does. This is part of our first ROC training program and forms the introduction to our first installment of the program called Mining Justice Basics. This program has been built with the generous support of the Real Estate Foundation of British Columbia. So in this short video, I'm going to answer a simple question. What is the Fair Mining Collaborative? The Fair Mining Collaborative, or FMC, was formed in 2002 as the charity arm of the now closed Environmental Mining Council of BC. We are a BC-based organization and we focus on issues regional to BC. We are a registered charity, and we were formerly known as the Environmental Mining Education Foundation, or EMEF. And back when we had that rather clunky though descriptive title, we were also more commonly known as Amy Crook's organization, our venerated and now retired executive director. FMC is guided by our mission statement. The Fair Mining Collaborative, or FMC, provides values-based, credible, technical, and strategic guidance to communities, First Nations leadership groups, and political decision makers, with the intention of building capacity to support informed land use decisions that foster healthy, sustainable communities and ecosystems. We are a charitable foundation who partners with our clients to build knowledge of mining impacts and benefits so they can fully participate in fair land use decision-making processes that affect their future. We assist communities with reaching their intended outcomes. We don't advocate for a particular outcome. FMC has completed groundbreaking research and analysis of mining issues and best practices, which we share on our website. This information informs our publications, training programs, and collaborations with other organizations. Our seminal piece, Fair Mining Practices, a New Mining Code for British Columbia, took 4 years of intense research by law students and lawyers, and was written with the support and contributions of, among others, the University of Victoria's Environmental Law Clinic, and Advocates for International Development, or A4AID, a London-based group which connects lawyers around the world with volunteer projects. These lawyers vetted much of the manuscript, ensuring that laws from their countries were accurately presented. So, in the Fair Mining Practices, a New Mining Code for British Columbia, which we affectionately refer to as the Code, we divided BC's mining laws and regulations into 10 chapters which follow the mine cycle from claim staking through to mine closure, and also cover community mining policies and bonding. We gather and discuss the issues found in BC's mining laws, and then find solutions from over 70 jurisdictions around the world, other Canadian provinces, First Nations, the UN, federal and state law from the US, and other jurisdictions around the world, like EU, Ecuador, Philippines, Colombia, Brazil, Australia, and New Zealand, to name a few. The Code makes over 400 recommendations for either improving existing BC mining laws or filling gaps where no current laws exists. And during all this research, we paid close attention to how other jurisdictions approach Indigenous rights and title. From the Code came the Northern Secwepemc-Tequelmc Mining Policy, or NSTQ Mining Policy. This was ratified by the Northern Shuswap Tribal Council in December of 2014. It is the first Indigenous mining policy of its kind in the world and has been implemented by the 4 bands of the Northern Secwepemc Tribal Council: Soda Creek, Williams Lake, Canoe Creek, and Canam Lake. It was written in statutory format, so basically it's written as law, and its 55 pages contain 100 sections and 11 appendices, outlining clear expectations the NSTC have of government and industry in all facets of mining. It is the only place we know of that defines meaningful consultation in the Canadian common law duty to consult with Aboriginal peoples. To implement the work we did in the Code and the NSTQ mining policy, we've created the Mine Medicine Manual, a community resource. This is a handbook and includes a 30-page field guide. It is the foundation of our educational curriculum and a self-teaching guide for resource managers or anyone with a keen interest in mining in BC. The self-teaching portion includes 8 exercises for students which build capacity to effectively engage when mining interests come knocking. The first 4 of these exercises are performing background checks on miners, profiling and compiling research data from key mining claims and claimants, assembling and using all applicable laws, including BC mining laws and First Nation laws like the NSTQ mining policy, and rallying community support. The next 4 exercises lead the reader through conducting media and public outreach campaigns, dealing with notice of work permit applications known as mining referrals, performing field work from the 30-page field guide, including mine site inspections, water sampling, and soil sampling, and using common map systems and navigation methods such as the British Columbia Geographic System and National Topographic System. FMC has also built an exposé of the placer mining industry in BC, commissioned by First Nations women advocating responsible mining. Placer mining is the small-scale gold mining that is the darling of reality TV shows like Gold Fever and Yukon Gold, and has had a more or less continuous history in BC since the gold rush in the 1850s. Unlike other types of mining in BC where the issues are fully exposed, we found a total lack of publicly available information on placer. So we submitted Freedom of Information requests, analyzed data, spoke with government officials, community members, and academics, and we delve into what we did find over these 3 reports. These are the first reports ever written in BC that look at the potential environmental impacts of the placer mining industry and how the government regulates it. Our first report is High Environmental Impacts versus Low Economic Return. This report highlights the fact that BC earns insignificant royalties from the hundreds of operating placer mines, less than $65,000 in 2015, and that is the highest total on record. We discuss the environmental damage caused by placer mines in BC and how it has never been adequately studied. This first report also shines a light on the widespread historic and possibly continued use of mercury in placer mining, and reveals that while only 30% of placer mines ever receive an inspection, information indicates that as many as 50% of mines violate their permit conditions. Our second report covers the Fraser watershed and environmental assessments. It's called The New Gold Rush: Placer Mining in the Fraser Watershed. It highlights a 2012 study by Andrew Nelson and Michael Church that calculates over 110 million metric tons of placer tailings have been added to the Fraser River's natural sediment load during the gold rush years, and a greater amount of sediment is sequestered upstream of Quesnel. And since 1980, about 1,400 placer mines have operated in the Fraser watershed. Perhaps most alarming of all is that we were unable to find a record of a BC placer mine ever undergoing an environmental assessment, in contrast to the Yukon, where hundreds of mines have undergone environmental assessments in just the past decade. Upcoming in 2018 is the third report on placer, The Lost Creeks of Atlin, featuring the placer mine waste control regulation of 1988 that essentially sacrificed 9 creeks to placer mining in the Atlin region in northwest BC. These creeks had already been extensively mined during the gold rush years and the years following, but rather than remediating the damage, the province allowed miners to discharge their tailings without the protections afforded to every other water body in the province. Within this report, we also took a deep dive into a 10,000 entry dataset that had every placer mine in BC, every security payment ever made, every inspection for the past 2 years. We found a host of problems. Mines given permits to operate with no security bond, meaning that if the miner fails to reclaim their site, that responsibility will fall to the taxpayer. We also found mines where the last permit had not been closed, suggesting that the mine had never been reclaimed, and we found bonds shared between mines and bonds that were never topped up, despite new permits extending operation. Altogether, these issues were found with 32% of the placer mines in BC. That's 1 in 3 placer mines in BC we found had problems with their security bonding. Submitted in March 8, 2017, FMC also sponsored the University of Victoria's Environmental Law Centre's call for a public or judicial inquiry into mining in BC. Titled Fixing Systemic Failures in BC's Mining Regulation, the Urgent Need for a Judicial Inquiry. It concludes that the state of mining in BC is experiencing a crisis of public confidence, and lists the profound dysfunction and systemic failures in the BC mining regulatory scheme. It cites the more than $1 billion that the BC government is short in security funding that mines should be providing, and discusses how the ministry itself is seriously underfunded, and exposes how BC's mining laws are still grounded in the 1800s and must change for the 21st century. Lastly, Equal Rights and a Fair Field, FMC's Mineral Tenure Report, asks for wholesale fundamental changes in the way land is valued and allotted for mining purposes. It concludes that not only does mineral tenure legislation need to change, but so do provisions in the Land Act, Environmental and Land Use Act, Park Act, and other statutes that contemplate mining. It makes 6 main recommendations: setting free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples as the new legal standard for negotiation, an expansion of no-go zones in Section 11 of the Mineral Tenure Act, using FMC's impact area value formula to assess the true cost of mining to account for environmental externalities that until now have been written off by industry and government, a new, full, and fair process for landowners, notably to remove the short 8-day notification used by miners before entering private land, and to end people staking claims and then holding them for indefinite periods with either no intention or no capacity to mine, or holding claims for other uses, also known as dead staking or adverse tenure. And finally, but perhaps most importantly, a 5% restitution fee on all physical work reports to capture all physical environmental damage done by all miners, even those working below the threshold for a permit. You can find these publications and more at www.fairmining.ca. And while there, make sure you subscribe and donate. As a charity, FMC is able to issue tax receipts.